Does it tell you that something in this case is particularly bizarre because everyone is thinking about this, everyone is talking about it? There's a weird thing here where it's like we're all using these products and we know that every other week there's another story about how they've been hacked into or our information is leaked, et cetera, and yet the solutions seemingly have not come yet, although I know that it seems like perhaps there's some stuff on the horizon.
Well, there's this concept that I don't think has a name, which is a QWERTY monopoly. So if you remember QWERTY, it's the weird keyboard configuration that we can't get rid of because it was supposed to slow down typists so that the keys didn't jam, so the letters are in the worst possible places. So right now, you're probably using a QWERTY keyboard to keep your keys from jamming on your typewriters. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons it's so hard to dislodge, because network effects play the role of a QWERTY path-dependent advantage, and once you've locked it in, then the idea is it's very hard to dislodge. It's not impossible, and I have no doubt that eventually competitors will emerge with or without antitrust, right? But part of what I don't like is the whole romanticization about non-use of force or non-initiation of force, because quite frankly, I don't want to pay my taxes. I don't know. You guys may love it, but for me, it's not a big feel good.
Pretty sure they don't love it either.
Really? Okay. So if you don't love it, but on the other hand, your tax dollars are often argued should not be. You should not have a gun put to your head in order to extract your money to pay for things like basic research. That's a very understandable perspective. On the other hand, I view it differently, which is I'm not allowed as a mathematician or as a physicist to lay claim to the fruits of my labors under the intellectual property system. And so I'm in a bad spot, and I think that those aren't your taxpayer dollars, they're my physics dollars, right? Because my physics dollars bought the development of the semiconductor. They won World War II at the end. They created the World Wide Web out of CERN. And so all I want is a little bit of a licensing fee so I can extract money out of all of you for using all the great things that we developed. So when you say, well, why should my tax dollars be used to pay for your physics habit? My point is, are you kidding? Why should my physics dollars be supporting your lavish lifestyles when I'm not able to charge? You got the best deal in history for extracting a rent from me because I'm unfairly disadvantaged. So there's all sorts of ways of turning this around. You can look at public goods, you can look at any place where price and value gap in a market, and the problem, of course, if we're all, again, let's fast forward because the easy stuff is uninteresting. The question is the problems of fixing it using a tool, whether it's blunt or even surgical and incisive, versus the problems of leaving it alone. And it's, in some sense, it's type 1 versus type 2 error. There are two different ways to go wrong. And in general, the reason that objectivism is so powerful is that it gives a permanent thesis or antithesis in the dialectic, so that everybody who wants to use the tools has to confront the people who don't want the tools used. And the question here is, would we be better off in a universe in which something like objectivism prevailed generally, or is the use of objectivism is its highest and best use as part of a dialectic to constantly bring us to a more meaningful synthesis between two different systems with two different sets of problems? And I would also say that in terms of like the non-initiation of force, it's always strange to meet Israelis who believe in the non-initiation of force because of the '67 war. I mean, there's situations in which you can pretty much see what's coming, and you got to do what you got to do because surviving a calamity is much better than a self-extinguishing strategy. So I think that all of these things require refinement. They require a location within dialectics, and these tensions are fascinating. What's going on with Google, I think, is that we're slowly waking up to the idea that free speech, free markets are not sufficient paradigms. In the case that we built these machines where these are now merely heuristics, and we can't figure out what is the best way forward to capture the essence, the intent of free speech and free markets, because what we are agreed on this panel, I think, is that ultimately any system that doesn't value the radical individual with a better idea than the rest of society and shackles that individual to collectivism, right, is not optimal. We need some situation in which the radical individual can say no to tens of thousands or millions of people and produce something of great value and great beauty and grace for all of us, or for themselves. And any system that doesn't have that aspect to it is not a system that I want to be part of. The key question is, what should the substrate be below that? And the objectivism has never been tried at a national scale, so far as I know. But the question is, what is its role at the dinner party of interesting ideas? Should it take over the dinner party? Should it be invited? Is it so dangerous that it needs to be kicked into the shadows? And that's what I think that we're here to explore. But what unifies us, I think, in part, is the, and I said this in a tweet before I came, I felt very strange being invited to an Ayn Rand Institute event, because my two critiques is that, one, she was not sufficiently aware of the problems of multi-level selection. Sometimes we act at individual level, but we can also act at family level, group level, national level, mimetic levels. But the other thing is that I found her insufficiently radical in defense of individualism, right? That, thank you.
He's going to explain this one.
Her heroes are sort of sympathetic. They're people who want to do brilliant, beautiful things. And if you read an article that I wrote called "The War on Excellence," I am against excellence. Many of you are for it. I believe that excellence crowds out genius. And a lot of the geniuses that we deal with, let's say the transistor on which everything rides now, is largely a development of Bill Shockley, the famous eugenicist. Our three-dimensional structure of DNA was understood by Jim Watson. I just spent a week with him not too long ago. Let me tell you, that guy has points of view that you cannot take anywhere. We have to celebrate these people. And we were just talking in the green room about my time at Hebrew University. It was very interesting to me that we talked about the Bieberbach conjecture. We talked about the Stern-Gerlach experiment and Pascal Jordan's Jordan algebras. All these people are Nazis, right? We celebrate Nazis in Israel with the names on their achievements. It's an absolutely radical idea that we don't, sometimes we say, may his name be cursed, but we still use the name. We don't sanitize it. When I visited Rome recently, I went to the Arch of Titus, and I held up my middle finger because it celebrated the destruction and looting of Jerusalem. But I don't want to burn it down, right? So the idea that we should burn the Merchant of Venice because it's against my people, all of these collectivist impulses have to be silenced. We have to figure out how to fight them and make better cases and make these voices go quiet, not through force, but through humiliation, right? Because these are terribly destructive ideas. The world has birthed all sorts of fantastic things. Many of these things were created by people whose hands were not clean. And if we keep trying to sanitize everything that human beings have done and make it all brilliantly heroic, we're doomed. So we need a more radical defense of individualism than I think Ayn Rand could afford.